In June 1979, Bishop Abel Muzorewa made history by becoming the first black prime minister of the country we now call Zimbabwe, but at the time named Zimbabwe Rhodesia. However, he would only be in office for only 6 months. And at the time of his election, Muzorewa was the most popular non-militant black politician in Rhodesia, commanding massive crowds of over 50,000 people. His party, the UANC, won the 1979 election by a landslide, garnering over 67% of the vote, with more than 1.2 million people supporting it. Yet, within 6 months of his premiership, everything fell apart, reducing him to political nothingness, to the extent that, by the time the 1980 elections were held, his party secured only 3 seats. But how did this dramatic collapse happen? And more fundamentally, how did a mere bishop rise to become the first black prime minister ahead of seasoned politicians like Robert Mugabe, Joshua Nkomo and Ndabaningi Stole? And by the way, why didn't he become president? Why become prime minister? Well, fellow Sadaiters, slay queens and bingers, socialites, papalites, vasinamalites, varikudgarais, never kurumanelais. Welcome to the special report. In order to fully understand the story of Bishop Abel Muzorewa's rise to power, we must begin in 1970. But first, I need to paint a picture of what Rhodesia was like politically before Muzorewa's rise. The year is 1970. The country is the Republic of Rhodesia. The president is Clifford DuPont, but he is just a ceremonial head of state. Real political power is in the office of the Prime Minister. Ian Douglas Smith has been in power since 1964, and his political party is the Rhodesian Front. It has an overwhelming majority in parliament, controlling 50 out of 66 seats. The remaining 16 are reserved for Africans. 8 are chosen by black voters, and the other 8 by traditional leaders. Rhodesia also has a Senate made up of 23 members, 10 white Rhodesians, 10 African chiefs, and 3 senators appointed by the president, who at this point is Clifford DuPont. The official opposition at this time is a party called the Center Party, led by moderate white Rhodesians. It controls the 8 seats reserved for black voters. Meanwhile, the nationalist movements of ZAPU and ZANU are banned. They can't function in Rhodesia, so they operate from exile, waging an armed struggle for one man, one vote. Their senior leaders, Joshua Nkomo, Robert Mugabe, Ndabaningi Stole and others, have been in detention since 1965. So, in their absence, ZAPU's war effort is led by James Chikerema. ZANU's war effort is led by Herbert Chitepo. They are all based in Zambia. It must be noted that the fight for majority rule isn't just about war. It also involves dialogue, geopolitics, and notably activism. And some of the notable activists are Bishop Abel Muzorewa and Reverend Kenan Banana. By the early 70s, these two are rising stars in the game of freedom fighting, often using the pulpit to criticize the Rhodesian government's racial policies. Muzorewa in particular ends up getting banned from visiting rural areas in tribal trust lands. Now, Let's examine the geopolitical dynamics of Rhodesia's relations with the international community. You see, geopolitically speaking, Rhodesia is isolated. It's been 5 years since Ian Smith unilaterally declared independence from Britain. So the whole world, with the exception of South Africa and Portugal, refuses to recognize the regime of Ian Smith. The United Nations, Britain and the Commonwealth impose sanctions to pressure Ian Smith into accepting majority rule. But Smith rubbishes the sanctions and remains undeterred in resisting majority rule. He famously declares, "Not in 1,000 years." And fast forward to November 1971, Ian Smith and the British government finally agree on terms for majority rule. The deal lays out a roadmap, but it's a very slow road. The plan is not about flipping a switch to majority rule overnight. It's a gradual process with specific steps. Britain pledges to grant legal independence to Rhodesia if Smith sticks to those steps. This deal becomes what is known in history as the Anglo-Rhodesian Proposals. But here's the catch. Britain faces a lot of pressure regarding these proposals. The pressure is coming from the Commonwealth and African countries. So what does Britain do? Britain sets up a commission led by Lord Pearce. It becomes known as the Pearce Commission. This commission is sent to Rhodesia to find out whether the black majority are happy with the Anglo-Rhodesian proposals. Remember, we said the Anglo-Rhodesian proposals are about majority rule in Rhodesia, but at a future date. It's a gradual transition to majority rule. So the Pearce Commission is sent to Rhodesia to gauge public opinion on these proposals. Nationalist leaders, including the detained ZAPU and ZANU figures, oppose the proposals. They authorize the formation of a new movement inside Rhodesia to oppose the Anglo-Rhodesian proposals. So members of ZAPU and ZANU who remain unarrested in Rhodesia meet to discuss the formation of a new movement. These are Josiah Chinamano, Edson Sithole, Michael Mawema, and a few others. They resolve to form the African National Council, ANC. On the question of who is to lead the new party, they first consider Chief Rekai Tangwena. However, Chief Tangwena is preoccupied with an existential crisis in the struggle for his people's land, making him unavailable. They then turn to the Methodist Bishop Abel Muzorewa, who is well known nationally for his principled stance against racial discrimination. So they ask him to lead the new movement. It should be noted that at this point, Muzorewa is not a politician. He is a preacher and a vocal government critic. Muzorewa's situation can be illustrated as follows. Imagine it's 2023, before the elections. ZANU bans the CCC and the MDC, arresting Nelson Chamisa and Douglas Monzora. The remaining opposition members then proceed to form a new party with the blessing of Chamisa and Monzora. But due to their long-standing factional fights, they fail to agree on who should become leader. So in order to resolve the leadership question, they turn to an outsider like Apostle Chiwenga to lead the new party. Now, while we can all agree that Apostle Chiwenga is an outspoken government critic, he has never led any political party, which underscores his inexperience in political leadership. However, his inexperience is not the primary concern. The bigger issue lies in the underlying divisions within the new party, which is formed by adversaries, men and women who harbor greater animosity towards each other than the ruling party which they seek to oppose. They oppose each other more than they oppose the ruling party. A divided party cannot succeed. The factions within the MDC-CCC differ sharply, even on the simplest of issues. So therefore, entrusting such a fractured group to a politically inexperienced pastor like Chiwenga would be a recipe for disaster. That is the situation Bishop Abel Muzorewa finds himself in when he gets invited to lead the ANC in 1971. And this ANC is not to be confused with the 1957 ANC. The 1957 ANC is the African National Congress. The 1971 ANC is the African National Council. And also, this African National Council, which Muzorewa leads in 1971, is not to be confused with the UANC. You will see the difference later. Anyway, as I said, in 1971, Muzorewa becomes the ANC leader by invitation. But it must be noted that the role of the ANC is to oppose the Anglo-Rhodesian proposals, which we talked about earlier. Yes, the ANC is a new party, but it is not created to rival ZAPU and ZANU. In any event, it's created by members of ZAPU and ZANU. So therefore, it's a strategic alliance, a marriage of convenience to deliver a resounding no to the PS Commission. So when the PS Commission begins its work, Bishop Abel Muzorewa shines. Under the slogan, "No independence before majority rule," Muzorewa rallies massive crowds. The campaign succeeds. The PS Commission reports that the black majority rejects the Anglo-Rhodesian proposals. Britain adopts the report, but Smith dismisses it. He claims it doesn't reflect the will of the black majority. By the end of 1972, Muzorewa emerges as Rhodesia's most popular non-militant black politician, surpassing the unarrested ZAPU-ZANU members who invited him to lead the ANC in 1971. His international profile grows as he supports the UN and British sanctions on Rhodesia. In October 1973, he is awarded the United Nations Prize for Human Rights Achievements. Now, eager to dilute the PS Commission's impact, Ian Smith invites Muzorewa for talks on the roadmap to majority rule. There and then, divisions within the ANC begin to surface. Some members get frustrated by Muzorewa's soft approach to the uncompromising Smith. They begin to question his ability to negotiate. By late 1973, key figures like Zobgo resign. They leave Rhodesia to join the armed struggle. Zobgo in particular was the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC before his resignation. In March 1974, the ANC holds its first Congress, and Muzorewa remains the undisputed leader thanks to his national popularity and the absence of critics like Zobgo. Meanwhile, there is a big change that is happening in the region geopolitically. Portugal loses control in Mozambique and Angola, leading to the independence of those two countries with radical governments. This is bad news for Ian Smith because it means Rhodesia will soon be surrounded by aggressive governments which will help Zipra and Zanla to escalate the war. This is also bad news for apartheid South Africa because it doesn't want the rise of another radical government, this time in Rhodesia. South Africa wants a moderate government in Rhodesia, one that is not aligned with communism. Rhodesia served as a geopolitical buffer state between South Africa and the independent states north of Rhodesia. So the South African Prime Minister John Vorster and the Zambian President Kenneth Kaunda devised a plan called détente. Détente is a French word which means the easing of relations between warring parties. And yes, it's okay to pronounce it as detente. So under this a new strategy of détente, spearheaded by South Africa and Zambia, and now with the support of the frontline states, Ian Smith must agree to a ceasefire and release the jailed ZAPU and ZANU leaders. Remember, most of them have been in detention for almost 10 years, some even 11. The other condition of détente is that all nationalist movements must unite under one party and under one leader and negotiate as a united force with Ian Smith for majority rule. Smith agrees to the terms and releases the detained leaders of ZAPU and ZANU. All that is left now is for the nationalist leaders to unite under one party and one leader. The nationalist leaders in question are Joshua Nkomo leading ZAPU, Ndabaningi Stole leading ZANU, James Chikerema leading Frolizi, and Muzorewa leading the ANC. All the nationalist leaders agree to the concept of unity except ZANU. There is a faction in ZANU led by Chitepo and Mugabe which is vehemently against the idea of unity. However, they are forced by Kaunda and Nyerere to play ball. And when they all meet to discuss the leadership structure of the new party, they get the biggest shock of their life. Kaunda and Nyerere proposed that Joshua Nkomo should be the leader of the unified movement, deputized by Muzorewa, with Ndabaningi Stole as Secretary General. The proposal is rejected. There is no way ZANU is going to let Nkomo lead. So after heated talks, all parties agree that they should all unite under the banner of the ANC, with Muzorewa as president. So once again, the bishop becomes a compromise leader, chosen for the same reasons as in 1971. His neutrality amid the ZAPU-ZANU rivalries. So when Muzorewa becomes the president of the unified ANC, he feels like the goat when he's actually a goat among political lions. So Muzorewa leads the ANC in negotiations with Ian Smith for majority rule, but nothing comes out of it. And 8 months later, Nkomo, backed by his friend Kaunda, wrestles power from Muzorewa and becomes ANC president. But Muzorewa retains control of a smaller faction, which he later renames UANC, meaning United African National Council. He renames it after the Geneva Conference, after many of his senior leaders like Banana desert him, joining ZANU. It's also worth mentioning that when Nkomo wrestles power from Muzorewa, he continues talks with Ian Smith, but again, nothing substantial comes out of it. The end result is that Ian Smith has missed a grand opportunity to reach an internationally recognized settlement with the moderate Muzorewa and the less radical Joshua Nkomo. This changes the political trajectory of Zimbabwe forever. Now, when the detente fails, war resumes, and international pressure for majority rule in Rhodesia intensifies. Even South Africa increases pressure on Ian Smith to consider majority rule, but with a moderate government. As I mentioned earlier, apartheid South Africa does not want Rhodesia to have a radical government. The issue of a moderate government in Rhodesia has even been proposed by America. This is what leads to the Geneva Conference of 1976, initiated by Henry Kissinger. But no country in the world wants a moderate black government in Rhodesia more than apartheid South Africa. It uses its economic muscle to pressure Ian Smith to concede to the idea. And so, on the 3rd of March 1978, Ian Smith signs a deal with Abel Muzorewa, Chief Jeremiah Chirau, and Ndabaningi Stole. The deal is known as the Internal Settlement. It establishes an interim government led by an executive council of 4: Smith, Muzorewa, Chirau, and Stole, with decisions requiring unanimous agreement, giving Ian Smith veto power. Muzorewa and Stole are given control of paramilitary groups known as auxiliary forces. The forces under Muzorewa are known as Madzaku-Dzaku. They do patrols in tribal trustlands to keep Zipra and Zanla guerrillas out. In January 1979, a new constitution is approved in a nearly whites-only referendum, reserving 28 seats for whites in the House of Assembly and 10 seats in the Senate. And for the sake of context, the House of Assembly has 100 seats and the Senate has 40 seats. Elections are held in April 1979, and Muzorewa's UANC wins with over 60% of the vote. Muzorewa becomes Prime Minister, deputized by Dr. Silas Mundawarara. Josiah Gumede becomes the ceremonial president. So Muzorewa in 1979 does not become president because constitutionally, Zimbabwe Rhodesia is a parliamentary republic. All political power is vested in the office of Prime Minister, and the president simply performs ceremonial functions. So from 1923 to 1987, the highest political office in the land is that of Prime Minister. So there you have it. In June 1979, Bishop Abel Muzorewa becomes Prime Minister after winning by a landslide. But ZAPU and ZANU denounced the election, vowing to continue the war. Muzorewa goes on a diplomatic offensive to try and gain international recognition for his regime, but his efforts yield nothing. The international community, including Britain and the frontline states, rejects the internal settlement. It is criticized for maintaining white control over the military, police, judiciary, and the civil service. So therefore, Zimbabwe-Rhodesia remains unrecognized, with sanctions intact. Muzorewa inherits a beleaguered economy and an intensifying war. The Rhodesian army, still under white control, effectively kills in his name. It is no longer killing in the name of Ian Smith. It is now killing in the name of Bishop Abel Muzorewa. This makes him enemy number one for ZAPU and ZANU, particularly ZANU. He aligns himself with Ian Smith's stance on criticism of frontline states and condemnation of the UN sanctions, further alienating himself from the international community. By late 1979, mounting pressure forces Muzorewa and the Rhodesians to attend the Lancaster House Conference. Remember, the Lancaster House Conference is an all-stakeholders conference. All consequential political players attend the Lancaster House Conference. And as we all know, the 1980 elections are a result of the Lancaster House Agreement. And in those elections, Muzorewa's party, the UANC, only manages to get 3 seats. He has been reduced to political nothingness, having lost all the support, respect, and goodwill he has enjoyed since 1971. And in 1996, he pulls out of the presidential election, citing an uneven playing field. Afterwards, he retires from active politics after over 2 decades of political life, having started with the ANC in 1971. And to this day, he remains the only clergyman to have held the highest political office in the land. Other notable clergymen who excelled in politics are Reverend Kenan Banana, who became Zimbabwe's first president, though ceremonial; Reverend Ndabaningi Stole, the founding president of ZANU, who was also part of the executive council which ran Rhodesia from 1978 to 1979. So you see, pastors are no strangers to national politics in our country. But is it fair to say our pastors always get outsmarted in the game of politics? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the rise of Bishop Abel Muzorewa to becoming the first black prime minister of the land we call Zimbabwe today. Even though he wasn't a skilled politician, Muzorewa played a pivotal role in the transition to majority rule. As Prime Minister in 1979, he accustomed white Rhodesians to black leadership, weakening Smith's grip on power. Yes, his stay in power was very brief and his authority was limited, but his administration marked the beginning of the end for white minority rule. So maybe, just maybe, that was the silver lining to Muzorewa's debilitated political career. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoy the content, please like and share.